Well, good morning, everyone. So nice to see all of you here for this event. I am Anita Vassallo. I am the Director of Montgomery County Public Libraries. I'd like to welcome you all to Silver Spring this morning for the signing of the executive order, which will rename the Silver Spring Library in honor of our distinguished county resident, Brigadier General Charles E. McGee. I had the pleasure of meeting the Brigadier General several years ago, and on behalf of the department, I would like to say how honored we are to have one of our facilities named in his memory. And now I would like to introduce our county executive, Mr. Marc Elrich, who will make a few remarks.
So this is a really nice day to gather, and I'm very happy to be here. I want to acknowledge the family of Brigadier General Charles E. McGee and remind them that, you know, our thoughts are with them and sympathies and condolences for the loss of their father last month. I want to thank Jawando for championing this legislation and getting it through in probably near record speed. And I want to thank the perpetual can-do attitude of David Dice from Department of Governmental Services and Anita Vassallo from our public library system to quickly do all the work that enabled this to be possible. There is probably no better way to end Black History Month than memorializing a Montgomery County resident who is an American hero, a trailblazing African-American, and a man who lived an extraordinary life. To understand the core of what makes this nation great, we need to look no further than the life of Brigadier General Charles E. McGee. He was one of those veterans in his generation who fought in the Great War, and they were referred to as the greatest generation for their heroic actions during World War II. This was my parents' generation, and when I was growing up as a kid, every adult at that time was shaped by the war. My father even had a carbine that he never used, and I think had been partially disabled, but that was a memento of his service in the military. This generation is often put on a pedestal in history for their altruism and to combat fascism on both sides of the world. And it is that generation that led to the liberalization of America. And you like to think or hope that the irony of the war, that we sent people who were not free in this country abroad one more time to fight for freedom, probably led to a breaking point where the people who had to make those sacrifices said they weren't going to put up with America the way it was. And it led to a long struggle. It didn't end after World War II. It took a long time to get close to what we need to do, and we're still not there yet. We're still fighting to recognize the history of people in our country, which is just, it's tragic, it's undemocratic, and it doesn't do anybody good to deny what happened here. So that generation made enormous sacrifices, and our African-American citizens who participated in that war made those sacrifices with no guarantee that when they came home that life would be as it should be. What's lost in all of this is that Jim Crow persisted, and when we think about the greatest generation and what they got out of the war, the opportunities for housing didn't extend to black communities, the opportunities for education didn't extend, the opening of workplaces didn't extend. None of the things you would have thought were a normal part of American life were extended after this enormous effort by the community to make a difference and to make sure that we actually won that war. America fought nations that believed in racial superiority, and we were one of them. The military didn't think African Americans were fit for combat or leadership. And for a long time, they tried to keep them in menial jobs of unloading trucks and doing things that were supportive but not directly military. And they were very reluctant to put guns in the hands of African American soldiers. And it handicapped the war effort. I mean, this was a time in American history where we needed everybody's hands in the front, and deciding that they would not take this, large part of our population and give them the opportunity to be on the front and to relegate them to subordinate positions was just one of the long string of tragic events that, has bedeviled this country. Christopher Paul Moore wrote in his book, Fighting for America, Black Soldiers, the Unsung Heroes of World War II, and he says black Americans carrying weapons, either as infantry, tank corps, or as pilots, was simply an unthinkable notion. More acceptable to Southern politicians and much of the military command was the use of black soldiers in these support positions. However, as casualties mounted toward the end of the war, the military was forced to utilize African Americans as infantrymen, officers, tankers, and pilots, and they took those jobs and they performed them like everybody else performed them. They were successful, they learned, they succeeded, and they were necessary to being able to overcome the Germans in Europe. And to that, I want to extend my thanks. I mean, it is hard to fight for things for people who don't appreciate the work you're doing, and I just want to acknowledge that. The success of General McGee and the Tuskegee Airmen was well chronicled, and they're now rightly at the forefront of what is taught to students about World War II. And the Tuskegee Airmen were credited with flying 1,600 combat missions, destroying more than 250 enemy aircraft, one German fighter that General McGee shot down out of the air while escorting B-17s over Czechoslovakia. The heroism of the Tuskegee Airmen was etched in history by Hollywood, and upon notification of the passing of General McGee last month, Vice President Harris immediately called him an American hero. However, General McGee was more than a World War II hero, and he spent 3 decades serving and protecting this country while always fighting for equality. He logged over 6,300 flying hours and a remarkable 409 combat missions, among the most in service history. He flew bombing and strafing missions during the Korean War and piloted photographic reconnaissance planes during the Vietnam War, going on at least 100 combat missions in both of those conflicts. And in each war, his plane was hit by enemy fire, coincidentally, both times on the right wing. And maybe some message in that. In 1995, General McGee told the Associated Press, "You can say that one of the things we were fighting for was equality of opportunity. We knew we had the same skills or better." And we're renaming this building for General McGee because of the opportunities and the equality he provided to the generation who followed in his footsteps. Our world today is built on the freedom from tyranny that he fought against as a pilot, and freedom from repression that he fought against as a civil rights trailblazer, and as a black man, a father, and a husband in America. And General McGee fought these battles first so his kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids, as well as all of our kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids, would not have to make that fight. And this is an American hero, and the least we can do is ensure his name and his accomplishments will never be forgotten. And I'll just say that, it is important for us in all ways to incorporate the history of the African American community in this country fully into our education systems and fully into the work we do. We're at a sad point in American history where people want to write this out of the history books. They want to pretend that slavery was a minor inconvenience and all of these other relatively atrocious ideas that seem to pass for knowledge. And we've got to make sure that they're not allowed to raise a generation of children who do not understand what America history is about and don't understand not just the good stuff and not just the celebrations of a moment, but they need to understand the reality of life in America as a black American from before the Civil War to the present day. We've got work to do, and we're going to continue to do that work. And this is part of what I think is important, is recognizing and elevating significant members of the community to a place of recognition. So I want to thank you all for coming here, and I think I turn this over to Mr. Jawando.
This is an exciting day. I first want to just say hello and thank you to Yvonne McGee and Damon Smith, who are here, daughter and grandson of Brigadier General Charles Edward McGee. On behalf of many, many family and friends, and I'm excited we get a double dip because even though Google already knows that this is the library, if you look on it, it's on there now. We were just joking about that. The sign downstairs doesn't reflect it yet, the display that will be here eventually honoring some of the history, and I'm hoping we can hang on to one of those great Tuskegee Airmen red jackets and other things. There will be more to come when it's officially, the name is changed outside of the building. But this is an important day, and I really appreciate the county executive for working with us to make this happen, and the Department of Libraries and DGS to make this happen during Black History Month. I think it's significant that we will set in stone today this library that will serve as a reminder and a marker for excellence, for humility, for continuing education, all the things, for bravery, all the things that the general stood for, and that we need now more than ever, the fight for freedom. The county executive mentioned this. We are at a moment now where people are literally taking arms up across the world in a fight for democracy, and part of the world where he flew. And we have just next door in Virginia, books that I'm sure he's in being banned. Knowledge is under attack. And it's important. You can't get where you want to be in a multiracial, diverse, socioeconomically, the whole range of things we have here in the county unless you tell the truth about our history. And you have to tell the full history. And General McGee, in his 103 years, it's funny, we had a chance to honor him 2 years ago when he, just after his 100th birthday, and he was just elevated to Brigadier General. We had him at the county council, and he kept wanting to stand, and every time we tried, we're like, no, you can sit down, you're 100, you've earned it. And we just, let us honor you. But it just shows you the type of man he is, and I'm really happy. I was able to tell him then, we were going to name something after him, and I was hoping it was going to be a library, and we got it done, and as the county executive said, in record time. This will be a long-standing reminder of not only the perseverance of African Americans, the journey our country has been on, but how far we have yet to go. Because we are at a critical moment right now. And I'm so excited that I'm going to be able to bring my kids, and other families are going to be able to bring their children and learn about this nearly 30-year resident of our county who spent his twilight, I shouldn't even call it twilight, spent his years in his second job of educating young people and going to fairs and talking about all he did in this county. And I think it's so fitting that we'll be able to have a library named in his honor. So I want to thank again my brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha here, who are, you see standing there, they're the good-looking gentleman right there. That is our fraternity. It was the fraternity of General McGee. He always would proudly, if you look at some of these pictures, talk about his time in Alpha, and you're going to hear from them shortly. But we're really, really excited and look forward to continuing this legacy for years to come. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Before I read the Senator's statement, I had the distinct pleasure of meeting the Brigadier General when he celebrated his 100th birthday by coming out to Frederick and doing a little flying. When I heard about that, I was simply blown away by that, and he did it. And it just kicked off, I think, what was a whirlwind year for him, because from there he ended up at the Super Bowl, at the coin toss. He was in Delaware, Texas. He was on a national tour. And I also had the pleasure of meeting his family, just the most wonderful group of people I've ever met. And you are so lucky to have had him in your lives as long as you did. Charles McGee was one of the greatest airmen of all time. His service spanned 3 decades, 3 wars, and 6,308 hours. He amassed a record 3-war total of 409 combat missions in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, more than any Air Force fighter pilot, with 100 missions or more in each. But General McGee didn't just break records, he broke barriers. As a Tuskegee Airman, he provided a watchful nation which should not have required proving that Black Americans could serve in the armed forces and serve with distinction. In Congress, I introduced and passed legislation to honor Charles McGee's heroism by authorizing his honorary promotion from the rank of colonel to the rank of Brigadier General. There was no disputing that he had earned that promotion throughout his courage and leadership. Today, we further pay tribute to General McGee by rededicating the Silver Spring Library in his name. It is a fitting tribute to a man who was deeply passionate about building community and investing in education. Generations of Marylanders, young and old, will pass through the Brigadier General Charles E. McGee Library, learn of his extraordinary heroism, and feel inspired to carry forward his torch of service. I want to salute Councilmember Jawando, the County Council, and the entire team from Montgomery County that helped make this possible. Charles McGee's story will guide us forward in our pursuit of a more just, equitable world. This library is an important part of keeping that story alive. Thank you.
Of course, Yvonne, grandson Smith, thank you for sharing General McGee with us. Of course, I'm going to come up, and the unfortunate part is not going to be a canned speech. General McGee and I have had many conversations, and he always closed with stand tall and call me Colonel Mac. So I had to adjust, of course, when it became General Mac. But it was always something between he and I. When I picked up the phone and I called him, it was always about going somewhere and sharing his knowledge, his information with other people. How appropriate that now people get to come to a location with his name on the side of it. He would never stop teaching, never stop providing information. One of those things that so many people in this room, there's a lot of people here, they are here because he provided information and came when we needed him to come. So General McGee, as far as the connection to Tuskegee Airmen in this red jacket, he was one of our presidents, did a lot of work, kept the organization going when we needed to go. He also was named in one of our chapters, 50 chapters, one of them bears his name. That's a pretty significant piece of information, knowing all the Tuskegee Airmen that were involved in the experience. More than 16,000, and we've picked his name to be one of the 50. He continues to place his name and his stamp on who we are and what we do. And as Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated, we appreciate that. And we thank you all in the red jackets, those family members that are around. We appreciate all that he did. How appropriate. Thank you.
I bring greetings from all the brothers of the Montgomery County chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the chapter of Brother McGee for the last 30 years. My name is Brother Kevin Johnson, and I am the president of the chapter, seated here in Silver Spring, Maryland. It is truly a tremendous honor to stand before you this morning, and I thank you for the invitation to say a few words on this historic occasion. Brother McGee was a devoted brother of not just our chapter, but our fraternity for 81 years. 81 years. He often mentioned that Alpha was one of the primary influences in his life and instrumental in the model that he chose to live by. To us, he has always been a national treasure, a role model for young people, and the embodiment of service to our country. But more importantly, he was the influential voice in a room when direction was needed. He was the model of decorum, grace, and honor in a world that sometimes lacked it. And he was truly our brother. Brigadier General McGee received numerous awards in recognition that, in this time I cannot cite. You've heard a few. But his courage, his humility, his grace was unmatched. It is what we saw each day and how he lived. Thus, this commitment by our Montgomery County leaders will ensure that we are reminded of our hero, this hero that has influenced many to perceive something that's greater than imaginable. This hero that has instilled the tenacity in many to prepare for a brighter future, a future full of hope and achievement of the impossible. This hero that trailblazed by riding the wings of angels, educating many on the importance of being able to perform. And of course, this hero that has inspired many to dig deep, to reach within, to drum up the courage to persevere. This library will exemplify a lasting legacy that states that we are capable, we can achieve, and we can accomplish. General McGee's lifelong commitment was to scholarship, to leadership, and to public service. He was passionate about the plight of our young people and often spoke to our brotherhood about honoring our commitment to be servants of all, changing the lives of the future scholars in our community, and continuing our service to our brethren. This man, this monument that stood for education, set the example for all that knew him, served with him, and were encouraged and mentored by him. And of course, all that called him our brother. It is truly befitting that a library in Silver Spring, Maryland, a structure dedicated to learning, a mainstay of the Silver Spring community and a symbol of progress, be named after this beacon of learning. We thank all the members of our government associated with this endeavor, as this is definitely a testament to your belief in scholarship, leadership, and community service. Further, it's a glaring example of what this country, this county, and its leaders chooses to achieve for this community. So I close with this thought that I've heard quite often here recently, and hopefully will continue to hear from this moment forward. We cannot always, or we cannot all be a Brigadier General Charles McGee with the soaring accomplishments, the missions, the medals, the over 80 years dedicated to this community. But we can all strive to achieve the character, the courage, and the tremendous determination to make the lives of others in this community better. Let this action, this renaming of the Silver Spring Library, be yet another example of our commitment to making lives better for all. Thank you so much for your presence, your acknowledgement, and your support for Brother McGee. Thank you.
So I've been able to know Yvonne McGee, one of the general's
Youngest daughter.
yes. Oh, sorry, the youngest daughter. There are two other children who couldn't be here, but that will be here hopefully in the summer when the sign is here. But Yvonne, I'm sure she'll tell you, actually works down the street from here, and has been taking care of, or I'll let her tell it. I don't know who was taking care of who, but her dad for living here with him for quite a bit, and is always at all the community events. And so she herself is a community fixture as far as helping our children and doing things in this community and just contributing for many, many years. And so it's been an honor to get to know her. She is going to speak and represent the family. So please give a big round of applause to Yvonne McGee. Thank you.
When he called and told me the news about what he was working on and how it's coming to fruition, I did cry, and I know Dad was very happy of what you're able to do. Back in 2020, when Montgomery County bestowed Dad with the proclamation that February 12th of that year was going to be Brigadier General McGee Day, Councilman Jawando said to me that one day he wanted to have a public building named after Dad, so people could be reminded and inspired by what Dad represented not only to our county, but to our state and our nation. And based on Dad's extensive traveling abroad, I can safely say, I think, to the world. And that day is today. The selection of a library is most apropos. Most people know Dad because of his military career. I won't go into that because I think a lot of people have already explained his importance in our country's history. But what a lot of people may not have known is that growing up in the McGee household, our parents made it clear that our jobs as children was to get an education and to always do your best. We were taught that an education was always going to be part of life's journey, and that continuing education was important in having success to a good life, for a good life. Growing up before Google, the library was where our parents took us to find answers and to expand our thinking. It was a place of solace to focus and study, and that never changed. Dad read all types of things. He liked fiction, nonfiction, magazines, newspaper. He read all the time. Our house over the years began looking a little bit like a library itself, except not so neat and organized. We have books and stacks on the floor in the living room, shelves in the kitchen, under the coffee table, and thank goodness for the library books that we could return. He thought it was important to be able to share and keep young folks motivated because he felt their future was going to offer new challenges and they needed all the help that they could get. He loved talking to young people, whether it was in a classroom or just on the streets. He would ask them what they were planning for their summer vacation, or what they enjoyed doing, or what places they might want to visit. The worst thing a student could say, or a young person could say, was, "I don't know." Dad would change gears and in a kind way offer a challenge to them. "You don't know? Well, have you been to the library?" My sister reminded me just this weekend when we were talking that have you read a good book was also a way that Dad would also introduce and start challenging young people to think about, what it is they want to be about. I hate to say that there was certain occasions where I would be saying, "Please have an answer, please have an answer, please have an answer," because I knew if they didn't that we were going to be there for a minute. As he engaged them with trying to go a little deeper with what they were about. Along the way, he came up with what he called his 4 Ps. And I know people that know him know that it's perceive, prepare, perform, and persevere. He wanted something easy, kind of a mantra for the young people to remember. So he had perceive, prepare. Perform was always do your best with excellence as the goal. Persevere would be don't let circumstances be an excuse for not achieving, and don't give up. The library is a place where you work on his first 2 Ps, the perceive. Dream your dreams and develop your talents. Discover what it is you enjoy doing and what you need to do to keep that a part of your life. And the prepare, learn to read, write, and speak well. Without these skills, it'll be difficult to make a way or to take advantage of opportunities. I know people give Dad accolades and they do it to honor him, but I also know that he always received them on behalf of everyone who couldn't be there, and also the people that helped him along the way. He always acknowledged others who played a part, redirecting attention to a bigger picture that he felt blessed to be a part of. I hope when people see Dad's name on this library, they'll come to see his gateway to the first 2 Ps, perceive and prepare, and understand whatever they study, they follow his spirit of learning to uplift oneself in order to enjoy a fuller life and to be of service in the bigger picture. To Executive Director Elrich, Councilman Jawando, Director Vassallo, thank you, and Director Dyson. I want to thank you all for making this possible. I know it's been a journey. I look forward to people learning more about what Dad means, not only to this county, like I said, but to everyone, and are inspired by when they see his name on the door, that they come in with understanding that learning is always going to be at the forefront of keeping having a good life, and what we all need to focus on, particularly with the young people. So on behalf of the McGee family, I would want to say that thank you so much. I know Dad is smiling on us, and we're so appreciative of sharing him with the world.
All right. Welcome
to the Brigadier General Charles E. McGee for the library.